What have you left it? The city you've always pecked in for a place without feathers in need of preening, where even the ground felt soft. Horizon stretched west looks like sherbet with a cloud on top. You make to eat it, you hope to stuff the whole sky down your throat, one gulp, and fall back onto land, thudding and stunned. Can a sparrow fall back? Fall? Haven't you digested one morsel of this scenery? You're in wilderness now, and you must decide how to become that type of bird. Look up. In the Y oak branch, nest big as a tree. Who goes there? Hello, you chirp. I've come seeking some new bird self, neck and beak lifted to grow tall, now eye level with root top. Sparrow takes a vacation from a collection of Autumn McClintock's poem, A Dirt Bird, and Autumn is our guest tonight. So welcome, my name is Charles Carr, and welcome to Philly Loves Poetry, at the beginning of our 8th season of this series. And I'm very grateful to Philly Camp to continue this, and also that we're now back in the studio live, and I really appreciate that. So the focus of Philly Loves Poetry is to give our audience, both the viewers and the listeners, the experience of the rich culture of poetry in the city of Philadelphia and the surrounding area. And as I said, our special featured guest to start off the 8th season is a good friend and fellow traveler in poetry, Autumn McClintock. Autumn is a freelance writer and editor. She lives in Germantown now. Her newest chapbook, Dirt Bird, from which I read, was recently published by Alexandria Quarterly Press, and Autumn's book, After the Creek, was published in 2016 by Finishing Line Press. Autumn's poems have appeared in The Count, Cimarron Review, Denver Quarterly, the Georgia Review, among others. Autumn is poetry editor of Doubleback Review, and if you want to get in touch with Autumn, you can go online at autummcclintock.com. I'll spell her name for you, or spelled in this online address, AUTUM as in Mary, N as in Nancy, M as in Mary, C as in Charles, LINTOC.com. So, Autumn, welcome. I'm glad we finally could get you on here. I have to, confess at the opening is that Autumn is really a friend of mine from really the beginning of my time in writing poetry. So we go back a while. I was in workshop for several years with Autumn, and I therefore had a front row seat to the poems that she used to write, which were always remarkable. And this book that we're going to be discussing tonight is just remarkable. As I've told Autumn and I've told other people, I've read this book now 4 times, maybe more, and some of the poems more than that. It's really, and so I don't know if it's flashing up, but here's no, that's After the Creek, but if you see this, it'll flash up. It's called Dirt Bird. It's just an exquisite, design book, very simple. It's very much in the genre of Autumn, for all those who know her. Isn't that beautiful? That's a beautiful book. It really is. Just a gorgeous book. So the first thing, Autumn, I would want to say, I mean, this is really an unusual book in the fact that you're really focusing on this bird, the sparrow. And I wanted to know, what's the genesis of this? I mean, you've written about other topics, and here we get very focused on and concentrated in this story about this marvelous bird that you have encountered.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks, Charles, for inviting me, and it's great to talk to you because we do have some history and go back a long time working on poems together, and I really appreciate that. And I owe a lot of the beauty of this book to my niece Gabriella Belmonte, who painted the bird on the cover, and to Tamara Caraher, the editor of Alexandria Quarterly Press. So the idea for the sparrow actually came from, and I think of it as sort of a conversation between the human and the sparrow, or like the human sort of trying to become a sparrow. And the idea comes from actually another poet friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, who started calling me Sparrow at some point, and I think that was her sort of way of blessing me with some love, because I think she was referring to a song sparrow or a white-throated sparrow, something like that. But when I heard that, I was like, well, no, I'm not that sparrow. I'm this sparrow that we see everywhere.
Wow.
In the dirt in Philadelphia. They're ubiquitous. They're very common. They're
Right.
an invasive species, and I'm like, no, I'm one of those. And so that's sort of a personal thing. And then I took the sort of personification of that and used that to start this conversation between the sparrow and the
How
human.
long did it take, to really build this series?
These poems are actually mostly written in 2019, over a series of months. I don't remember exactly how long it took, but I was interested in the form, and it sort of came together with the idea of the bird. I'm not sure exactly of the genesis of that, but I think I probably wrote them over a series of 4 to 6 months, and then during the pandemic, sometime in 21, I realized, oh, I have those poems. I have those sparrow poems. I should look at them and put them together and see if they are really something. And then I pulled them all out and put them into a little manuscript.
Well, they are really something. And so for our viewers and our listeners, what is unique about this book is that the short form, specific forms that you use to realize these poems, the haiku, which probably batankas, rengas, chakas, and there some of these forms I heard of, but I've never seen. But the way you employ them, I mean, when you think of a bird, in a way they go so much together.
Yeah, that was some really good fortune, or it dawned on me, or it seemed to be the right fit. I'm interested in. They're all Japanese forms. They're all syllabics, I should say, and I sort of take some liberties with the use of the tanka in particular by sort of piling on them on top of each other sometimes. But I'm always working in the 5-7-5 sort of world, which is the 5-7-5 syllable world, which is the genesis of the Japanese poem.
Mm-hmm. So, and this is not the first time, of course, I've encountered Autumn's style of poetry, although let's say it wasn't necessarily using those forms. But as I said, I have been in workshop, or was in workshop with Autumn for several years. And the one thing I'll always remember about your poetry is what you accomplish with less. I mean, you are the quintessential person I'm talking about. Less is more in your poems. And I mean, not only in Dirtbird, but even in your previous collection, is you don't waste a lot. I think you said to me on the phone, I'm the policeman of adverbs or something.
The adverb police, yeah.
Adverb police.
Yeah.
And it really shows up. Can you talk about that style and how you have come about to master that?
Well, thank you. I mean, I don't know if I mastered it, but that's the idea, is to get there. I'm not a particularly verbose person to begin with, so maybe that's a good starting point. But I think it's one of our tools in poetry, right? that's the one of the differences between prose and poetry is that this economy of language, and to sort of to glom onto that is something that I'm super interested in. I want to sort of carve something down to its essential form in order to make the image shine, and also to get the idea across. That's my hope anyway. I owe some debt of gratitude to my husband, Craig, who who is who he calls himself a strict imagist, and so he's a lover of Pound, who was really into that sort of economy of language, and Williams, who were these short, tight poems, and we sort of grew into that space together, and I think I've grown into that voice a little bit, and you'll see later when I read some work that I've tried to separate out from that a little bit and stretch myself. But I'm interested in making the poem as succinct as possible. That's one of the ways I edit and work.
Now, are there poets that you draw on for influence? I mean, poets that people would recognize, of course, and there's others that you really have a relationship with. I mean, relationship in terms of you follow their work, etc. Can you identify some of those for our audience?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my first poet love, which is sort of funny considering, was probably Whitman, who is the opposite of
short form.
Short form. Yeah. But one of the poets I'm really interested in more recently, who I think I would like to be like, her name is Jane Hirschfield, and she is able to say the sentimental next to some very specific image, and sort of get away with saying something like, "I love you," or or "my soul is in pain," like something that some of us in workshop might consider like schlocky, like what's this like cheesy thing doing in here next to this. So, but I think she's an incredible master of economy, and so I'm really interested in her work in the last few years. One of my earlier sort of grad school influences that I want to shout out, because I think today is the 1-year anniversary of his death, is Charles Simic, who, and I just always was fascinated by the way he was able to sort of blend the mysterious with the with narrative, but also in a pretty succinct way. So those are two that I'm.
Yeah, well, with Simic and others. And I think I said it the other night with another poet that I was reading with. I said, Simic takes the ordinary and makes it extraordinary without getting to, dressing it up a lot of bows and ribbons and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you really sometimes scratch your head and you say, geez, that's something that's so routine, that's something so obvious that he has built a poem. And I mean, I find that in Dirtbird also. I scratched my head and I said, geez, that is really quite wonderful that you can build a poem on something like on a habit or behavior that is so common. I think that is truly art to me. I guess in a way, from an art standpoint, I'm a little bit been spoiled by my wife, who's a painter, and she's a minimalist. And she's a minimalist in a lot of things in her life. And that's helped me compress me a little bit and then compress my love for certain poetry. Do you, you mentioned Whitman. Okay, Whitman can hold you. But there's poems that I read, and they're good poets. And I don't know if I have an intentional problem, but if it goes a bit too long, you've lost me. And I'm not being sarcastic in saying that. It's almost like, could you have broken that up into maybe 2 poems or 3 poems and given us that, because you would have given me a breath and a way to break. Do you have any sympathy for that?
I have sympathy for your take on it. I think I have some impatience with longer poems, and I sort of see that as something I need to learn going forward, is to sort of embrace these longer poems. Right now, I've in the last year I've read a couple books by this woman, poet named Mamie Bersenbruge. Do you know her
No,
work?
I don't.
She writes in, it's not quite prose, but these very long lines. And it takes a lot of sort of, for me, mental fortitude to sort of hold the idea of the work in my mind as I'm working through something. So I'd like to work on sort of the patience for longer work. And I don't have as much connection to it as I feel like I might as a student of poetry in the future.
Right, right.
Hopefully. I don't know.
So could you mention her name again? Because there might be people in the audience that, because I think people that tune in, they want to know about poets that they might not have heard about. That
Yeah.
maybe they didn't show up in the New Yorker, or they didn't show up in the American Poetry Review, or whatever. Maybe she was, but could you mention her name again?
Yeah, and actually she's quite accomplished, but I think, so it's Meimei, Meimei, and it's Bersenbruge, so hopefully I get this right. I think it's Berssensbrugge.
Okay.
I think that's right.
Thank you.
And she has one book called A Treatise on Stars, which I think is fabulous. Yeah.
So of course, with my guest, I generally go on and Google interviews that they've done before because I want to steal the thunder. No, to see what is said during some of these interviews, and I did come upon one interview that you had, and you had mentioned as a response. I don't know what the question was, but you said, "I'm not a confessional poet." I don't know if you remember that, but and so I took that response and I looked at it in terms of Dirtbird, and so there is a connection that I feel that the sparrows here. The sparrows is really. You said a friend gave you the name Sparrow. I said that is Autumn giving us a perspective on the world. That is Autumn speaking. I know you said, well, she wrote the poem, but this is you're giving a version of the world from that perspective, which is very interesting. I even, for example, in one Tonka, it's called Tonka with Warning. I don't know if you're going to read it. And you say, this may be the last warm chance before the storm premonitions. And there's others that are like that. They're really talking about the wider world and the bigger world and what is happening. So can you talk about that as how you relate personally and how this is a kind of a mirror of your perspective?
Yeah, I can say that. Well, who knows who will dig up this interview in another few years, and I'll have to answer for that. But I guess I've become kind of a nature poet, or that's one of the things that's most interesting to me. And the idea here, I think, in Dirtbird, is it's not overt, but there's this underlying menace of the Anthropocene, right? The current age of our environmental destruction. I want to be a responsible steward of our space, Philadelphia, Germantown, my home, in various. So I think that's how it relates to me personally. I'm less interested in whether, are these poems true about Autumn McClintock versus, is she the narrator or the speaker saying something that someone else will say yes to.
Yeah.
I don't know if that totally answers your question.
Well, I'm going to, the end of the next to last poem of the series, and it says, Chaka, for becoming a bird and letting go the human story. I don't know if you're going to read that poem, but can you talk about that? Because that was a very profound poem to me. But once again, very crisp, very short.
That's what I'm trying to do in this book, is have this conversation where the human is sort of constantly trying to figure out how to be a bird, but she can't because she's not. So there's this always like, I'm trying to fly. I don't have any wings. I can't do that thing. But so they have these conversations where sometimes she sort of, the narrator slips into the bird form, and sometimes she can't. She doesn't have access to that. So and I think that's the attempt there at that with that choka, where like, do we finally get to get in there and be a bird and
Yeah.
slough off the human mess that we've made.
Yeah, I just wanted to go for our audience, and Autumn will read some selection from this, but just some of the wonderful titles of. I did say Tonka with warning, Dirt Bird, Ugly Tonka. Incomplete Tonka in Storm. Of course, there's a signature poem called Dirt Bird here early in the series, but Hungry Tonka, Tonka Untranslated, Sadness with Sparrow Costume, Spring Chaka, which I thought is, once again, such a beautiful poem. Most Common Bird in the World is another title. Sparrow Takes a Vacation, which I've read, so, and that really like harkens back to some of the things we were talking about, the interplay between, these human beings. I don't think that the sparrows actually have a vacation. Maybe their whole life is a vacation. I wish I had a life of a sparrow. A taco, excuse me.
Or taco.
Tonka with Missing Sparrow. Bird, mistranslated bird. Sparrow turns down an invite. Sparrow searches of the violence we do. So once again, coming back to that theme, worship service, Chaka for leaving. I mentioned the other one. So
Yeah, I'm going to read a bunch of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a wonderful selection, and the titles that you've selected, really draw one in. I said something to him, and I said, Autumn's going to think I'm a little bit weird asking this question, but
I already think you're a little weird, Charles. It's okay.
But after I read it, this is like the fourth time I was finishing it, and I said, I feel like I've been in a play, or we've watched a play. And, so I've watched some very stinkers of plays, and I said, this would be, I'm not a playwright. Maybe that might be some type of future endeavor for you. But I really see the book in terms of that, broken down. I mean, it probably would be reorganized in a different way, but I see it an acting out of a play with the sparrow being the protagonist, the main character here, and probably other sparrows here, but even sparrows' interactions with human beings. And so I'm just throwing that out there as an idea. If there's anybody that's
I'm curious.
A playwright out here, buy the book and see what I'm talking about.
Do you know what triggered that? I'm curious. I guess I don't really know that much about theater or plays either, but
It's because it's behaviors. It's almost like
I see.
Behaviors. The sparrows have attitude. The sparrows have, they have expectations. They have wants and needs. And they're living in a world that, like we are, where there are forces that we can't control. There are forces that they can't control. So that's where I saw it. That's the conversation I had with myself after I read it again. And so I say if there's a playwright out there that says, hey, that sounds like a really good idea, here's Autumn. Get in touch with her. I gave you her online contact information. So before we jump to, really the things that people want to hear, I mean, they want to hear this conversation, but they hear you read these poems, what is your expectation for people when they read this book? What is your best hopes for people when they read this book. You saw, the reactions that I have had, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, even further out to see you see this book at another level of, So I don't want to talk about film, but that's another part of it, So I'm just saying, what expectations do you have?
Well, I mean, to a degree, this is fulfilling an expectation. I mean, the idea that you read the book and that you really enjoyed it so much that you wanted to talk with me about it and give me an opportunity to sort of share it with other people in the world and, Philly. That's wonderful. That poets don't go in expecting to make some cash, right?
Yeah.
There's no,
We know that.
and the scene, the poetry scene, even nationally, is actually pretty small once you start. But it's hard to get your work out into the world in a way that people that you don't know are reading it. So it would be great if there were some poets out there or other people who just enjoy poetry who were reading the book, and not just like the 50 people who love me and bought it because they love me. But sorry. Go
Do you
ahead.
think we as artists can do a better job of? I don't want to use of getting people to love poetry more. I mean, it's not with some people's love affair, but we had talked about Ukraine, right? And when I was in college, I mean, I had professors who were from Ukraine, and they used to talk about, where poetry used to be sold from newsstands, and poetry reading and poetry events were really big things.
Yeah.
I mean,
And we come from this Irish tradition where Seamus Heaney was a national star, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think we can do, or maybe what aren't we doing that we're not creating this love of poetry, which is about this show?
Yeah. I think probably schools are doing a better job teaching poetry or bringing poetry to students in an accessible way than they did when I was in school or that when you were in school. Like, my peers of people, I'm a Gen Xer, a lot of people go, oh, I just don't get poetry. And that's because in school, I feel like in high school, we were taught, like, this is the poem, it's a riddle, you have to solve the riddle, and if you don't solve the riddle, then you don't get it, and you failed.
Uh-huh.
And that's not what poetry is. Like, you read the poem, you absorb the imagery. If there's something in it that makes sense to your creative mind, then you get to carry that with you. It's not like you have to, like, solve for X, like it's algebra, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think they're teaching poetry, at least in Philly, I don't think they're teaching poetry like that. There's tons of kids who are doing spoken word stuff, and they're out there, and they're sort of expressing themselves in different ways. So hopefully we've turned a corner, and we're not telling people that they have to solve for X.
Yeah, and I think there, we can't censure poetry, but there is a lot of poem that I call sleight of hand, and so people say, they were playing the Jamaica trick on me. I don't know. I didn't know where the meaning was under which hat or what. And oh, geez, then I'm a loser because I didn't get it. And the honesty sometimes saying I didn't get it.
Yeah.
To say something, I didn't get it. I'm sorry, or saying I got this, and that's all I got. Well, good, you got something. I mean, we speak very liberally when we hear a piece of music. And you don't read music. They're not sitting there with a score in front of them saying, "Oh, I'm understanding the breaks here. I'm understanding the long and short notes, etc." People really come very expressive when they're talking about music. Not so sometimes with poetry, and so that's only. I don't think we're going to solve that riddle tonight. But this year, I'm going to pose a lot of that. Is how can we, as poets, as artists, increase the love of poetry to the ordinary. I hear so much that just what you said. I don't get poetry. I don't understand it. And if you read some of the poetry you read to them, oh, that's really fabulous. I get it. It's that, I don't know, maybe people are like frightened that, oh, if I don't understand the meaning and just can't talk about it, then I'm going to be embarrassed. And I don't think people have to be honest about it and say, I'm sorry, I don't understand it.
Right.
I mean, the piece of music being said, that's horrible. I don't understand. It's just noise, you know. So we have just hit the right time
Oh, okay.
to begin the real great time in the program when I turn it over to you
Okay.
and you read your poem. So
Great.
And thank you for this conversation. It was really great, and I think
It
your
was.
answers were great. I learned a lot, about what you were trying to do with the book.
Thanks. Okay. Yeah. I thought I might read a couple poems from After the Creek, which is quite a few years old now, but there's still a couple poems in here that I'm still interested in, so I thought I might start there. News. Made to recognize evil. You are made to. I want to go at the nose, teeth, line moving across the page. You will understand it. You will take up the body, justified unburied. Your father or dictator, past human, a pile of skin. Get in there with the best adjective. Language our way around it. That was actually a poem I wrote after Gaddafi was murdered.
I like that line, language our way around it.
Madrid, New Mexico. Kick aside the other bones. Whatever body it may be, bury it. Dirt and crag. The desert will drain like a common sink. Lick the sand, deep caught in teeth, to see if it flavors or gives way. All horizons chocked with scrub, dotted between with snow. Road hewn through as wagon went, crossed by fawn and steer. Center strewn and bloodied, from the red, strange earth we kneel. The herd. Suddenly snowy, cars brake lighting all the way to New Holland. After Thanksgiving, they're heavier on the pedal with a gutful. One skids, then another into the oncoming lane. One won't turn off its blinker. Left, left, left. We ease past a cop car who got done wailing at the scene. Then I see them, behind the fence, somehow out in this, black and white as an old photo, even through the sleet, each head hung like a hand fallen from a lap. And then, I thought, since we have some solid amount of time, I thought I would just march through most of these Dirtbird poems, because it's really only 24 pages or so.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and, I don't know if I should. So the first poem is, the title is sort of a bastardization of the Latin name for the house sparrow, the common sparrow that you see everywhere. I feminized it because I wanted the sparrow to be a girl. Passera domestica. You take up each of the syllables I need to complete this message. At the blue metal box, I dumbly stand and itch for flight. Tonka with warning. Alit on the hood of a parked car, one sparrow cocks its head sideways, chitters a clue to the few below. Fellows, let us feast in the waning sunlight. This may be the last warm chance before the storm. Premonitions, I tell you. Dark blood in the coming flood. With sparrowy shape, I crouch and fake a mind not mine. No arms or teeth. To understand the warning note, I make to sneak the bird. Dirtbird, ugly Tonka. Greasy feathers. No amount of preening shakes this city off. Here in the muck puddle of parking lot, I shudder. My brown, cloaked in gray, my beak a dusty choke. Maple breathing literally gives me flight, and in the air, I hope the filth will roll off, hope the dreck will soon stop clogging this sweet wicking and let me be. I look about. I sniff the world as I sense it. I don't know it beyond this blacktop. It's reflecting back my own small heat. Haiku and brambles. Sparrow body, this fragile, this typical one. Unbroken morning. Sparrow feather left graying across the path, gray as a lie cast off. When sparrow chitters, what consequence has she said, useless animal? Sparrow chatters as light pushes the day along. She does as she does, but doesn't know how to explain fire, sickness, or shrub with sparrows. Senryu or not. Try human issues. Try walking. Look left, look right. If haiku summer goes here. Sycamore reminds you of grandfather working at engines. Now shaken, stooped and unwilling. Mechanical bed like a sentence of white. Of upright at the nurse's hand. Made sound once again. Plastic straw for plastic soup from the box. We come and go in pairs just in case. No, don't let it end without sparrow alighting to tell you, tell it. Bitten by a hound once jumping down from an ash in the neighbor's yard. Teeth, your inner thigh, shock of hidden skin caught tight where no one had been. Again, you feel it as sweat hot, as if fear full with running on. Don't hesitate to slow at the root bed, the underworld. How bird nods, knows. Incomplete Tonka and Storm. What if we're dying, I ask you? Not this again. You look away, sick of petty dread. But the planet, I whine. It thunders then, so I understand myself to be a prophet. Leaves turn over. Don't use your petrichor against me, you say, and hop away on little bird feet. Puff up for the impending rain. I hope you'll still love me when my hair gets wet. Dirtbird. Get you clean, sparrow. In the dust, flap and settle. She shudders feathers and pecks pebbles, seeks breakfast from a thrown-off seed pod. What can I take? Food or dirt, sparrow. Hop and halt, hop and blunder. Brightish sunlight stings. No one knows my name within my name, where I'm called totally other. Passeroidia. You, old world, gave me this one, but it's lonely, cold. Say at least auburn, heather, creamy doused charcoal. Say I'm worth colors. Tonka untranslated. Speak English, even pidgin. We must understand the subtlety of wing or walk, and I can't yet lift my voice from off the ground. Hungry Tonka. Turns out I'm nothing special. Bird's a bird, unlike a butterfly, who's something else altogether first. Vanessa Cardui, Invention by Swift, a poem for his dear one. In your yard I might eat insects. I've been known to forget myself when hungry. Millet, sunflower. Today in the street, the core of an apple. Tart and fine in my nipping. Dirtbird maybe, but watch yourself. Spring choka. Your favor wanes here in the fleet blush of spring, where no one sees but what you've shown. A small opening, letting in the rain, a very little mouth for your stamen, a crotch, but then you spread, flail, and flash, flung open. Done this 1,000 paintings ago, O'Keeffe says. You go crimson, you go bending down to upturned soil. Sparrow hops beside, tugs pink-gray breakfast, slurps as you tilt. Sadness with sparrow costume. Funny little bird pecking my neck and closed throat. I call you low down, call you by landline, outdoor voice across the yard and field. You have no wings or flesh or crooked talon, not here as you perch, not the madhouse being you make of me, the slow-eyed drooping inability to turn and upturn of my mouth and cheek to chirp, "Hello, day. Hello, bright day." I greet you wide open and ready to yes you. Instead, your beak spreads wider, showing in full tongue all you ask, all of my selfish funneled down inside it. You swallow every dit and cell, unmind the frame. Better to eat you with, you say, chomping bird mouth, tasting in full this girl scar. Most common bird in the world. You same stubby hack, city living like you're wild, one of dozens of. Comment makes us seem ugly. Hops, pecks, hops, and chomps at the speck in her beak, then flings for lack of meat. Some seeds full, others just shells. Sidling up the tree, what about her twiggy feet, how they hook and hold? What if passer and grip went snap, lost its grasp, as I'm unable to grasp at the mad world, doubly angry and insane? Tanka with missing sparrow. Maybe you've gone out, emptying this tree's branches, letting in breezes, touched coolly, even coldly, as once when we tried speaking. I'm going to try this next one. It's sort of a conversation, so it probably is better on the page, but I'll try it. Bird mistranslates bird. Are you lonely, bird? Are you lovely? Bird echoes. Bird, don't you hear me? Be near me? It's windy here. Talking to yourself? Oh, bird. What's for breakfast, bird? Break and shatter these seeds now. But, bird, I'm hungry. What have I told you about feasting in streets with screamers? Sunlight pecks my eye. It brings the colors out, bird. It stings and weeps me. Crying never solved the maths, bird. Algebra, like tearshine. You, bird, make no sense. Who said I should take a stance? Sense, not dance, sparrow. Let you and me flutter here like a tango with more wings. It's a small movement of the neck, core kept rigid as you turn away from, then toward, and bird and blurred. Sparrow turns down an invite. So you disapprove? Prefer idle gatherings where friends land in hands outheld and on shoulders of green-shirted guests? What if we dance all evening to heron squawks and gull calls? What if we perfect a beautiful swoop of arms, lift off, like so, with a cry for suet and grubs? It's sonorous, serious, this party you scorn. I'm trying to do better at person, but I'm no bird. Sparrow searches. When breeze shivers lakes, it chills too the skin, raises all the hairs up, and you go looking for heron. She keeps the blue in. She stares. Of the violence we do. Rusty skull cap, tongue triples, a chitter treble, body frail as husk. I could crush you handily. Do you even own a throat? She bids me listen. The song sparrow calls out to an otherwise drab cluster of friends without one self-conscious doubt or warble. Forgive me, singer. You could be the god passed by in the dirt, begging, voice turned upward. I did not intend to prostrate myself, but I will it, now you've shown glad power. Branches bent this way, whatever beast shudders it, we're cautioned to glance about. Bring me back, okay? The glade stinks of bird killers, and I know them well. I confess to having heard they covet your song, bottled. Worship service. Heron, stay sacred. At the long edge of the lake, I spy you. Even from these branches in dense brush, you radiate. I covet. Ground paddled padded with green pine needles, bed for eyeing surface of water and storm-rattled sky at once. Reflection of wing flap, breeze. Have you yet noticed me hopping dutifully here like a maiden, a maid? You seek and you wait, but it's not for me, is it? Dear heron, this new day I'm emboldened. I strut near your nest, pecking. Can I clean or fetch prey? May I hunch at your feet? They say the Savior rode in a procession of palms and hosanna, rushes and reeds, hidden nest. Fish multiply, and we eat. Choka for leaving. Your feathers begin to mange, and beak buckles in. The glare of sun burns your eye, covered in film like milk swimming the bowl. Your talons crack and splinter, harm and hold nothing. You die these days, but taste it, the light wintering as a breath flung from the chest. One melody goes bluer. Choka for becoming a bird and letting go the human story. Epic history. When you sprouted wings one spring, the years altered to give themselves new color. Green as gemstone. Clearer sluice of streams than you'd known possible. With these, Earth's the surface redacting us. One long wave of movement. Sparrow instructs. You don't do it right. We are taught to stay contained to just 31. You can't keep from ruining the silence, the stone-white world.
Wow. So we have some time left. You want to read some poems from your other book?
Yeah, I mean, I have a
Or,
couple other ones if you
me.
want. No, I just I didn't know how long we had, but if we have a
Yeah,
couple
we
more
do. I
minutes.
mean,
Yeah.
we have another 10 minutes.
Okay.
Really.
I thought I'd change the pace
Great.
a little bit.
So before you launch into that,
Yeah.
what is your next? The people call it a project. What are you working on? Another book or?
I have a couple of things sort of. I have a full-length manuscript that I wrote. I have a couple of those poems here that I thought I might read. That I wrote a couple of years ago that hasn't found a publisher yet. That I'm hoping to get out there into the world, and that is in part a series of erasures. My mother wrote a journal about / for me from the time I was in utero until I was, I mean, it got less and farther and farther apart, but there's the last entry was when I was probably like 16 or 17. And I take entries I have that journal, and I take entries from the journal and I erase it to make a poem. So it's sort of a conversation between her journal entry and the poet. And it's that interspersed with, cancer, illness, death, mothering, daughterhood, childlessness. So that's a manuscript.
You don't have a publisher yet for that?
No, it's been very well rejected.
Please, that sounds like such a, given your poems, and given that as a theme, I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, I hope it finds a place.
I hope you get it, and I want to read that and be right here when it does.
Yeah, okay.
So it won't be a long time.
Okay, good. From your lips, Charles. Yeah. So I have a couple of those poems, but I thought I would switch the pace just a little bit.
Okay.
And read this other poem, which is a little more verbose. Dirt beds, not to be confused with dirt bird. Dirt beds. A child calls Daddy somewhere down the block, and maybe it's watch me go down the slide, or maybe it's I've climbed too high on the jungle gym like a cat needing a fireman. But what she cannot know is how we've entered the age of protecting children. No, from telling ourselves we're protecting children with a deep, squishy, hopefully recyclable rubber barrier between the 6 feet of air she could fall through and the who knows what dirt bed of a Philadelphia playground. And having fallen, she might only twist an ankle, but surely not suffer the concrete concussion they had offered us who grew up allowed together in unobserved groups in the basement while the adults got drunk and talked about Iran-Contra in a cloud of cigarette smoke upstairs until all hours, until half of us were asleep on cushions torn from whatever moldered couches hunkered there, softer below our gritty faces than some dreams we might be dreaming of being strong enough to hold on to the top rung, and while others were rifling through one dad's porn mag, and the oldest took up the back corner by the water heater and made out for the first time with hands roaming wherever over our ill-fitting t-shirts and corduroys, and someone's mom called down, "It's time to go, your father can barely drive," and you went with your mussed-up hair and muttered thank you at the to the host at some adult's urging, and they pushed you out the door and down the steps and into the waiting car. How am I doing? Okay. The Deer and the Maple. 2040 sounds prophetic until you do the math. Oh, so 2040 is, I heard, was the year of our destruction. So we've got what, 16 good years left. Sort of good years. 2040 sounds prophetic until you do the math. In the year of our Lord, storms will swallow the fine white tongue of New Jersey that for so long, like a deer at a salt lick, slurped the green-gray sea from Asbury to Cape May. And while the doe gives up for want of water, we will take up our guns to defend this tiny rivulet here in the deep wood. May I tell a true story? My mom's favorite tree, the Japanese maple in the side yard, red and low with bark not much rougher than human skin. One day, I climbed and broke a branch and tried, little fool, to mend it with Scotch tape, winding around and around the raw limb. When Mom found it, she raged inside to blame my brother, and I slowly closed the door to my bedroom, holding my breath to listen. So that's in the unpublished manuscript. So is this ticking the box. According to the census, I'm without child, which is correct if you count all the people in my household. We amount to chosen family. The army of ants don't call us mum and da, nor the cat who puts his paw in my open lips to let me know it's time. I don't bite down. This intimacy lost on him. Just now, in spring, with not much malice, I scraped away a webby pod from the side of the flower pot, and when dozens of tiny spiders flooded out, hardly ready to be in the world, I spread them against the concrete with my spade. I didn't mind, though they may have grown up to keep me from mosquitoes. Make such choices and scratch the skin to raw. Dear dead poet, thank you for your long hair and porcelain hand. Following you through one garden, I smell no regard for semblance or rose. What's it like to cultivate in the middle of a hurricane? What was it like, I mean? After fever, stomach sunken, it's as if I've won a contest. With an oversized mallet meant for smashing, go smashing the heads of each willing creature who pops his face from out his hole. I've heard women wrestle with being questioned, why no children? But no one ever asked me such a thing. Little spider, come back. I believe I've earned a prize. One or two more?
Yeah,
one more?
We got time.
Okay. Hurricane Autumn. Known already as a kind of weather, it's unlikely a hurricane will share my name. Wind in both of us a drumming down. Sometimes since I considered throwing a car through a window or twisting train tracks into a swan. I like a personal calamity, slow wrecking over years, until with a sudden whirling around, I find the path raised from my plowing through. But I was holding violets, I say, to my face-up palms. Heartline veers off an edge. Dear girls who grew up to be mothers, I do not love enough your children. Dear mothers, be warned, you will one day leave behind a child something like me. Children, be hurricanes just once. This one takes a little doing. Can you see me? Okay. Open the doors. This is a pandemic poem, which you will know. Open the doors. Here's the church, here's the steeple, and depending on how we've interlocked our fingers, open the doors, and here's an irate mob with semi-automatics, meaning to force the hand of the governor, meaning to force the man to braid his knuckles inverted, the opposite of lovers, middle finger pressed against middle finger as the mob screams where he can stick it, shrieking, and here's all the people, motherfucker, as he kneels at the altar and offers up a reason for wanting to live, and the pistols rise to eye level, and the bolts slide to unlock the glass entries of all the grand banks, and cash erupts from machines in surrender, and the grocery store employees must stock themselves on the shelves, while the mob lights the governor's hands on fire, and the steeple rises as one long flame, licking and dancing and collapsing into rubble.
Wow.
I got one more.
Good.
And this is my ode to Philadelphia, basically. The entirety of the world. Under a blanket of fallen cherry blossoms, in the crack between two squares of concrete, everything. Stem of maple leaf, scrap of drug baggie, blonde strand, cluster of sand shaken from a towel carried 100 miles from the beach, mint gum, chewed and spat, finger snapped from an action figure, corner of tinfoil, smudged with peach filling, hot tire shavings, mouse turd, slender yellow daisy petal, chip of acorn crown, hollow inner cylinder of a blue ballpoint, toenail, cat hair, skin, with all it carries, just plain dirt, and soon as the rain comes, mud.
Wow. That's really wonderful. This has really been a treat for me because,
Me too.
yeah, I've heard, you read your poems since we left workshop, but this intense and concentrated reading really brought back those memories, of being in workshop with you and being really kind of in awe of your work. And so, first off, how does one go about getting a copy of Dirtbird?
Yeah, you can find it on my website at autumnmcclintock.com.
Good. All right. So if they do that, do they get a signed copy or?
They can request if they want it signed.
Okay.
Or not.
Okay. Great. This is really wonderful. So once again, I say to, the playwright, the director, the filmmaker, there is really a subject for a great piece of art. I mean, this is a wonderful book. It's as I told Autumn, and I won't name the other poets because I don't want to, I don't want to get anybody else angry. But there are 3 poets in the last year and a half, all of whom I've had on Philly Loves Poetry, whose books are probably some of the best poetry I've ever read, and they're here in Philadelphia. So, and we were talking about, how can we help? Philadelphia really does have a thriving poetry community. And I say to people, you can find out where things are happening. Moonstone puts out, a poetry reading just about every Wednesday night at some location. Mainly it's at Fergie's. And so check that out because they have extraordinary poets coming reading up there, and you can have dinner and a drink, and you can listen to poetry free, which is really wonderful. So I want to thank Autumn. I really love this new location. I want to thank Sergio Galliano, who has been our technician and our director for years and years and years, and thank him so much for bringing us back in the studio and making this possible again, in a different venue. And I want to give a shout out, of course, to Moonstone Arts and make an appeal. Support Moonstone Arts. If you love poetry, put some money where your mouth is, really. And you can just go on our site, which is moonstoneartscenter.org, and you can find out a way you can contribute. Maybe it's not money, maybe it's other ways that you might have interest in. So once again, I thank our guest, Autumn McClintock, and stay tuned for other work that she's going to be putting out soon. So if there's publishers out there, you've heard her poems. So if you have interest, you know where to contact her. So thanks again to everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you in a month, and we have another local poet to bring you.